Oh shit, that's me. Hello everyone, my name is Ben, and the title is not clickbait. I know, it's crazy! Not only did we manage to get another invite to the next Digimon Nationals, but we also managed to get there with 0 losses. As always, I'm going to be showing you guys the card by card, why I brought the deck to the tournament, and show you the combos of what it can do. So, let's jump into it. So the deck that I decided to bring for this year's regional tournament was Black SOC, Ben Edition. So to go into explanation as to why I brought this deck to the tournament, I probably would have to go through the 2 elephants in the room. Number 1, why did I decide to go with black base over purple base? You see, after the Japanese meta developed, a lot of the Japanese players have decided to migrate over from playing black base SOC over to purple base SOC, mainly because it is able to use the cards like the Dorugamon package, allowing you to get SOC Tamers from your trash, while also allowing you to Digivolve from your trash as well. But the thing is, while that deck was very consistent, I found it to be a little too linear, and as a result, its power ceiling quite capped. Whereas black base actually has a lot more tools at its disposal, but I'll leave that for the actual card by card. Now for the second elephant in the room, why didn't I bring Lordmon to the tournament? Well, you see, to be honest, I actually really wanted to bring Lordmon, except one thing. I, for the life of me, could not get Lordmon to beat my black base SOC. You see, as I was formulating a list in order to try to get it ready for nationals, I made myself a black SOC list at the same time, in order to see just which deck is a lot more viable. Mainly because I expected SOC to be fairly prevalent in the tournament as well, so I needed to be able to beat that deck as well as other matchups in order to win the tournament. And unfortunately, in the right hands, there was no way that I could get my Lordmon to beat my black SOC. So I thought, hey, I love this deck anyway, might as well bring it. Now, for those of you who were wondering what kind of list I was cooking up with Lordmon, be sure to leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to give you guys a deck profile of that one very soon. Although I got 2 regional videos coming up, so that might not come out for a while. Alright, let's jump into it. And as always, from our deck profiles, we always gotta start off with the main focus of the deck. What are we trying to do with black SOC? Well, the main focus of the deck is obviously playing 4 copies of the Dorugoramon. Now, Dorugoramon is a very powerful level 6 and is going to be the main boss monster that we want to be staying on because it has the main effect of collision, meaning that while it attacks, all my opponent's Digimon have blocker and they must block if possible. And key note that the part that says the opponent must block if able is affecting the opponent specifically, and it is mandatory, meaning that for Digimon that are unaffected per se like Magna X, but if they already have blocker like Magna X, do still need to block while this Digimon has collision. But of course, that's not what makes this card extremely strong. It's actually going to be the when digivolving. If a Tamer card with SOC trait is underneath it as a source, it is able to delete an unsuspended Digimon or a Tamer. Now, after the recent ban list, I already made the prediction that Imperialdramon is going to be the strongest deck of the format. And in case you couldn't see it from the pie chart, I was absolutely correct. But also has the second effect of all turns, when another Digimon is deleted, doesn't have to be your opponent's by the way, you may unsuspend this Digimon. So basically, this being able to restand and always forcing your opponents to block gives us a lot of board control. It is essentially the new Black Greymon from BT8. But I really did feel like it was extremely important to play this at 4 copies because I really wanted to be sitting on this 90% of the time. Every time I wasn't sitting on this card on the board, I really felt like I was lacking a lot of board potential. And that is why we play with 4 copies. Which does lead to the secondary boss monster of the deck, which of course is going to be 3 copies of the Dexdorugoramon. And as you can see, I did in fact max rarity in all of its alt arts because it looks absolutely gorgeous. Oh, look at that thing. I love it. Now, what makes this card so strong? Well, it does have the trash effect of all turns. When one of your Dorugoromons will be deleted for whatever reason, it is able to Digivolve from our trash without paying the cost, which does trigger its one Digivolving effect of D-Digivolve 3 on any of one of our opponent's Digimon. And if we have Dorugoromon in its sources, we are able to delete all of our opponent's Digimon of the lowest level, meaning that if your opponent is not careful, this could be a sudden board wipe out of nowhere. And even worst case scenario, we can even Digivolve this on top of Dorugoromon for 2. And you see, this is exactly what I mean, where sometimes I really want to be sitting on Dorugoromon 99% of the time. That way I can always be threatening this effect whenever necessary. And even if we pitch it early on from one of our discard effects, this card will always be ready to trigger when the time is right. It is such a powerful secondary boss monster, and it's almost exactly what the deck needed, considering we're playing black base especially. And of course, it has the secondary all turns, which is the exact same as the Dorugoramon. When any other Digimon is deleted, it may also unsuspend. So potentially, if we can manage to get 2 level 6 on the board, we have 2 restanders, which with enough board presence can definitely OTK our opponent. But we don't really want to flood on too many copies of this card, because it really shines when we have a Dorugoramon underneath it. And while it is good sometimes to go straight into this over Dorugoramon, it is not as important as Dorugoramon himself. And that's why we only play 3 copies. We don't want to flood on this guy. I do want to make a note though that I do play 1 other level 6 and 1 more level 7 in the deck as well, but we're going to be leaving that for the tech options of the deck to give it a bit more explanation. But now that we introduced the boss monster of the deck, how exactly do we get there? Well, that leads us right into the strongest card in the deck, in my opinion, is the BT16 Dorugraymon. Now, he himself also has collision, just like Dorugoramon, but he also has the main effect of all turns. Whenever an attack is redirected, while this Digimon has a SOC Tamer underneath, this Digimon can Digivolve into an SOC, or Undead, or Beast Dragon from her hand without paying the cost. A super powerful free Evo. Which means that just from this card alone, we are able to turn this into a Dorugoramon or DexDorugoramon for absolutely free. We won't be able to get the board wipe from the DexDorugoramon if we decide to go straight into it, but a D-Digivolve 3 on a stacked deck is sometimes can be game breaking. But that's not all what the deck does. It also has the inheritable effect of, all turns when this Digimon deletes another Digimon, it may play a cost 5 or less X-antibody or SOC card in its trait without paying the cost. Now keep in mind it says play 1 card with X-antibody or SOC trait, meaning that it's able to not only play Digimon, it can also play Tamers. And this card alone, combined with some other combo pieces in our deck, really does maintain our board presence and gives us a whole lot of advantage. It's part of the reason as to what makes SOC so scary in the first place, which we'll definitely see on how it makes it so scary as we see the rest of the cards in this deck profile. But it's the main reason as to why the deck works, so that's why we play it 4 copies. And I see where we differ from here in black base over purple base is that purple base really likes to play the card Dexdorugraymon. Now Dexdorugraymon has a really cool combo with SOC as well, which I will definitely explain in the combo tutorial of this video, and I was playing it at some point as well, but a lot of the times I really wanted to have more than 4 level 5s in my lineup, because otherwise the deck becomes extremely piece reliant. So I was really looking for another level 5 to bridge into our level 6s, and I found the perfect one. We are running 3 copies of the BT15 Megadramon. Now, normally people like to see this in my Machinegimon list, but for those of you who don't know what it does in SOC, it has on play when Digivolving, we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, get 1 Machine or Cyborg or SOC trait underneath it as a source, then we can get a Machine or Cyborg or SOC to our hand, and then we get to trash the rest. This card is absolutely nutty. Holy, this card saved me so many times, because not only was it good at helping building up our trash, which is something that black base lacks over purple base, it also is able to get ourselves our Tamers for free, in case we weren't able to see them early on. Being able to suck up a Tamer from our top 3 and then being able to get another Tamer into our hand or any other missing pieces from our top 3 is extremely strong. And believe me when I told you that this has bricked me out of many situations in that entire tournament. But that's not all he does. He also has the when attacking, as long as he has an SOC Tamer underneath it as a source, he's able to pop a cost 3 Digimon or Tamer. And what did I tell you before, that it's really important to have Tamer control in this meta. And with things like Blue Hybrid running around with the cost 3 Koji that says it can't be blocked, we are able to consistently pop it whenever we so desire, without burning a Dorugoramon, mind you. So this card by itself is able to put in so much pressure. And just when you thought that it couldn't get better, it also has the when attacking inheritable of D-Digivolve 1 on one of our opponent's Digimon. Meaning that our Dorugoramon, whenever it swings with collision, it is going to be able to de-evolve on our opponent's Digimon before the counter timing happens. Meaning we also get to play our own aces. And from one thing I learned, for those of you who are struggling with SOC into Imperial Digimon, D-Digivolve absolutely cooks them. It turns off things like Primogenitor, and it also turns off their upcoming aces. Now, for those of you who wanted to try it, I originally was running 2 copies of Megadramon and 1 copy of the DexDorugoramon, specifically for the combo that I'm going to be showing you at the end of the video. But going into regionals, I knew for a fact that I need to make sure that my deck was as consistent as humanly possible, because I cannot afford to brick. As a matter of fact, I refuse to brick. And that's why we play at 3 copies. Now, I'm sure you're already sick of me talking about SOC Tamers all the time, but what are the SOC Tamers that we play in this deck? Now, you see, normally I would like to talk about the other levels in the deck first before I get to the Tamers, but you see, SOC as a deck in general really focuses on its SOC Tamers in order to get its whole effects off in the first place. So we're going to go through this first. And to start us off, we are in fact playing 3 copies of the Kosuke Kisakata, and yes, it is in max rarity. Now, strictly speaking, it is our main memory setter of the deck, and the main reason why I'm only playing at 3 copies is because I was trying to fit other Tamers into the strategy as well. And one thing you will notice a lot with this deck is that once you have at least 1 memory setter, it kind of does have diminishing returns as you see more of them throughout the course of a game. At most, I'd be happy with only seeing 1 to 2 of these on the field, at most. And now he himself, just like all the other SOC Tamers out there, for those who are familiar with Purple Base, he has the unique effect of Mind Link, allowing him to suck himself underneath a Digimon with SOC or X-antibody in his traits as his bottom source, provided there wasn't a Tamer there already. And his inheritable effects that he provides is Piercing and Blocker, which means all those times that we are going with Collision with one of our Dorugoromons, we're going to be able to pierce a check as well. Now keep in mind, we don't really want to always pierce, so that's why it's very important that we don't really want to see this at many copies. That's another reason why we only play it at 3. And like all other Mind Link Tamers, it also has the end of all turns, it is able to play out from our sources without paying the cost. Meaning we also get to be cheeky and bring out a memory setter whenever our opponent is least expecting it. But those aren't the only SOC Tamers we play. We also pair him up with 3 copies of the Marvin Jackson. Now, originally people aren't very used to this card, but I think this card is extremely important if you're trying to play black base of the SOC strategy. You see, the thing that purple base SOC has over black base SOC is that they are able to fill up their trash extremely quickly, whereas black doesn't really have many ways to set things up from our trash. But Marvin Jackson actually fits with the deck extremely well because it has to start a main phase, we can trash 1 card from our hand with Machine or Cyborg or SOC to gain a memory, which means we get to selectively curate our trash however we like in order to get more memory extension. So this can help us set up a Dex in trash while also allowing us to get any potential targets that we want to play off of that Dorugraymon. And its inheritable effect definitely caught a lot of people off guard in the tournament as well, giving us jamming and blocker, meaning that we actually have access to early chip in the early game, which, in case you guys forgot, we sometimes actually do want to do that with cards like the BT-15 Megadramon in order to pop our opponent's cost 3 Tamers or Digimon. And it's also a super spicy tech against Mirage too, because for those of you who are struggling against it, it is able to just discard a card from our hand in order to gain ourselves a memory. So it can help us reduce our hand size while also minimizing the Mirage Gagumon's all turns to gain memory on ours. This card was absolutely phenomenal, and as soon as you get to the rest of the deck profile, you'll also see why we play this at 3 copies. And to round off our SOC Tamers, we are in fact running 1 copy of the Eiji Nagasumi. Now, you might be wondering that a 1-of is not very likely to be found, but you see, this deck goes through itself extremely quickly, especially with 3 copies of Megadramon. So more often than not, we are very likely to be able to find this card. And worst case scenario, if we clog it in our hand and we don't really want to play it, we can always pitch it off the Marvin Jackson and then play it off the Dorugraymon. But of course, I felt that 1 copy of this card is extremely important, being able to run over things like Tyrant Kabuterimon, as well as the Magna X if need be, while also allowing us to get sudden security attack +1 pressure out of nowhere, in case we need to close the game. And of course, that memory extension that he provides at the start of main phase, as long as your opponent has a Digimon in play, really does catch our opponent off guard sometimes. So with our current Tamer setup, it is actually very likely that we will be able to start our turn with 4 or sometimes even 5 or 6 memory, just from this alone. If I had more space, I would have definitely fit a 2nd copy. Or at the very least, I would put a Cracker Fang in order to have a 4th memory setter in the deck, just in case. But I couldn't find room, so this is what it is for now. But now, we're going to get to a little bit of some spicy text of the deck. We are, in fact, playing 1 copy of Yuji Musha. Now, I'm sure you guys haven't seen this card in a very long while, so I'll be sure to explain it in case you guys didn't know. It is a black Tamer that has a your turn. Whenever we promote an X-antibody in our traits from our breeding area into the battle area, we can gain 1 memory and draw a card. And whenever one of our black X-antibodies attacks, we can suspend this Tamer in order to slide in any X-antibody card from our hand underneath as a source. This card, by itself, in my opinion, is 10 times better than Cool Boy. You see, a lot of SOC players really like to rely on Cool Boy in order to bounce out the fact that we're playing cards like DexDorugamon and DexDorugoramon in their strategies. But you see, I always hated it as a card, because it made your deck a lot more piece round than it needed to be in order to get its max value off, and it's also off color, which means it's not grabbable by trainings. And most importantly, Cool Boy's effect to be able to check the top 3 cards of your deck to grab an X-antibody, while it does sound good on paper, it's actually going to bottom deck your SOC Tamers, which, as I've explained to you before, is the heart and soul of the deck. If you don't see an SOC Tamer, your deck has no text. So let's be a lesson to you guys. Cool Boy is a bad card. Yuji, though, fantastic. I was really looking for a card that has the same kind of memory value that Cool Boy would give. And Yuji Musha, being able to gain a memory and draw a card just like how Cool Boy can, really did feel that niche. And it's a lot more easier to get off. And because it does trigger whenever we promote an X-antibody from our breeding area into battle area, that means we can offset cards like Digimon Emperor, which is sometimes a very good card against the strategy as well. But that's enough about the game 1 memory and draw a card, because in reality, the second effect is also extremely strong too. It being able to slide in any X-antibody card from our hand underneath it as a source really is good for being able to fix up bad stacks. So say for example, I was able to bring out a Megadramon that was always able to bring out pressure by popping cost 3 Tamers, and then suddenly Digivolving it into a Dorugoramon. While it is a decent stack overall and having a decent inheritable as well, what makes the deck actually scary is being able to get the free call off of Dorugreymon. And Yuji Musha does just that. Whenever we swing with the Dorugoramon, we can just slide it right in. But that's not all it can do too. This can also fundamentally function as a pseudo Marvin Jackson as well. If, say for example, we wanted to swing with one of her earlier stacks just to get some chip damage, but we were expecting it to die in security, we can actually use Yuji Musha to slide in something like a Dexdorugoramon just so we can get it in trash if it ever dies. The possibilities with this card is absolutely limitless, and it's absolutely broken when we get to the rest of the deck as well. I was originally running 2, but because I'm not running the specific combo with the Dexdorugoramon in my deck, I didn't feel like it was necessary, and instead I opted to run more SOC Tamers for consistency. So that's why it's at 1 copy for now. Now we can finally get to the level 4 portion of the deck. And just like how Dorugraymon is the heart and soul of why the deck is able to work, this card in particular is why this deck is actually scary. We are playing 4 copies of the BT16 Dorugamon. It having collision like the rest of the line, but it also has the on-play when Digivolving, we can trash 1 card from our hand to draw 1. And if we have an SOC Tamer underneath, we can choose one of our opponent's Digimon, and it has the effect of at the start of main phase, it has to attack. This card in particular is the whole reason why SOC is scary, because this paired with the Dorugray, we're going to be able to force our opponent's Digimon to attack and get plays on our opponent's turn, because the all turns of Dorugraymon is whenever any attack is switched. So that doesn't include when our opponent blocks from a collision, that includes when we block as well. And in case you guys forgot, all the SOC Tamers have blocker. So that is why we play this at 4 copies, is to ensure that we always have plays on both on our turn and our opponent's turn. And of course, early collision to be able to get rid of our opponent's early bodies in case they were trying to go for a more aggro style strategy is always extremely useful. And the inheritable effect of +1k came up a lot, which we're also able to slide more copies of thanks to the Yuji Musha, just in case we need a little bit more of 1k DP. But those aren't the only level 4s we play, of course. We do have to play 2 copies of the Airdramon. Now, I'm sure you guys might not know what this card does as well, but it has the on-play when Digivolving, we can slide 1 Marvin Jackson from our hand in order to de-Digivolve 1 of our opponent's Digimon. Now, in case you guys remember what I told you before, I made the prediction that Imperial Dramon is going to be the best deck in the room, and I told you guys that de-Digivolve 1 is extremely powerful against that strategy. And believe me when I told you the faces I saw when I was able to bring this out of nowhere and de-Digivolve their Imperial Dramon Dragon mode just when I was able to pop a training, denying them their free Evo into a fighter mode. It's extremely powerful. And of course, because it is a cost 5 SOC, we're able to bring it back from our trash thanks to the Dorugraymon as well, which means we can suddenly get a de-Digivolve 1 on our opponent, if your opponent is not expecting it. For example, I was able to do a force swing play thanks to the Dorugamon's effect when I went into a Dorugraymon while having an Airdramon in trash, forcing a Digimon with bigger DP than my Dorugoramon to swing. But I knew for a fact they had another Digimon on the field as well. So after they were forced to swing, I would block with the Dorugraymon, Digivolving into a Dorugoramon, which allowed us to pop the other unsuspended Digimon, which allowed us to bring us the Airdramon and then de-evolve 1 that big guy. It's an extremely powerful play, but not one that we really need to see as many copies of, so we're fine with only 2 copies. And the other level 4s we play, which is something that Black Base actually has over Purple Base as well, is we are playing 2 copies of the Sephirothmon. Please ignore the fact that I don't have another pre-release one. I can't find them anywhere. So someone please DM me if you find one. But what does this card actually do? Well, this card has the win Digivolving until the end of our opponent's turn. We can choose one of our opponent's Digimon and also gets the effect of start of main phase, it has to attack. Meaning that this is essentially copies 5 and 6 of the Dorugamon, just in case we aren't able to find it, which is excellent for consistency. But that's not all. Because this card in particular is a hybrid, that means we're able to Digivolve it on top of one of Black Tamers. So whether we use it for a hybrid for game, or we can actually use it in a comeback situation if they delete our stack. Because that means any of our Black Tamers from any point in the game could go into a Sephirothmon, followed up by a Dorugraymon, triggering a force swing play and then going into our level 6 on our opponent's turn out of absolutely nowhere. And because in particular it is 6k TP, we are able to play around things like Ruin Mode, which is actually able to shut down Purple Base SOC for at least 2 turns. This card is absolutely silly and has won me plenty of games, especially in the regionals. And that's why we play it at 2 copies. And to round out the level 4s, we are playing 2 copies of the Dexdorugamon as well. It having the trash effect just like the Dexdorugoramon, being able to Digivolve whenever our Dorugamon will be deleted for any reason. And when Digivolving, we have to trash a card from our hand, that is mandatory by the way. We get to draw a card, but if the Dorugamon is a source, we get to pop a cost 4 or less Digimon instead, which is pretty interesting removal. But the thing is as well that Black Base has over Purple Base entirely is that we have more copies of the inheritable reboot, which means a lot of the times we're going to actually be a lot more aggressive with our Dorugoramons and be able to wipe board board, or swing with extra chip, and will always be unsuspended for the clapback, or to make sure that our opponent doesn't swing into our stack. Which also keep in mind, because it's an X-antibody, we can slide in with Eiji. I'm telling you, man, Eiji is just a cracked card. You should get on it. Now, admittedly, you don't really want to see this card all that often. I only really wanted to see one copy of this throughout the course of the game, and I really wanted to play a different card instead to try to add more consistency to it. But I also felt like the protection from the Dorugamon is sometimes kind of necessary against specific matchups. For example, say Demon Lords or Leviamon. And sometimes Imperialdramon players will just want to swing at our Digimon anyway for piercing, which if they're not careful, we could Digivolve into this to prevent deletion. And also, worst case scenario, we can always just pitch it off Marvin Jackson for a free gain memory. So it's not too bad. If you wanted, you can actually cut one of these in order to try to play the SOC Tyrannomon as well. But I didn't want to play another level 4 that I'm not able to grab off of trainings, worst case scenario, in case I do need to evolve all the way up. So that's why I opted to just stick with the 2 copies in order to make sure I don't brick. I'm not sure if you guys were able to notice by now, I made it especially clear that it's extremely important that you do not brick for an event like this. And that's kind of why the deck is built the way it is right now. But feel free to experiment with all the tools that SOC has to offer. There are so many cool things you can do with this deck. But now we finally make it to our level 3s, the actual low end of how the deck is going to be able to function. And to start us off, we do in fact play 4 copies of the Dorumon. I apologize, that was upside down. We do play 4 copies of the Dorumon, and yes, as you can see, they are in full alt art. They're extremely pretty, and I love them! But onto the main effect here, like all the Mind Link rookies, it has the start of main phase. We can place 1 Kosuke Kisakata from our hand in order to prevent this Digimon from leaving the battle area, except by deletion, until the end of our opponent's turn. Now, originally that caveat of preventing everything but deletion was a really big downside. However, since we now have the Dex evolution cards from BT17, it really is just full protection at this point. And if I'm being completely honest, this card alone cements the fact as to why black base will always beat Imperialdramon over purple base. Getting that protection is monstrous, especially if they're sitting on a dragon mode, which also means that if we're able to do the force swing play with the Dorugamon and end on a Dorugraymon, they can no longer get a free evo off of that Imperialdramon dragon mode into a fighter mode ace, because they wouldn't be able to bottom deck the stack anyway, which could potentially lead to a free overflow for us. And again, the all turns are giving 1k DP. I will willingly admit, I thought that inheritable was absolutely garbage, but after playing with the deck some more, that 1k hella comes up, which we can always slide more buffs in case we need it, thanks to Eiji. Man, I've become a really big Eiji shill. Yeah, you should too. But this is the main rookie we want to see, and that's why we played at 4 copies. And as for the next rookie we play, we actually play 3 copies of the brand new BT17 Dorumon as well. Now, the main effect, being able to Digivolve into a Dorugoramon as long as I have a Kosuke Kisakata Tamer underneath when attacking, does come up sometimes, but I'll be honest, I never use that effect the entire event. I mainly use it for the inheritable effect of Reboot, which is extremely important to make sure that we don't get swung into on the clapback, and so that we can always have blocker up at all times. And there's another reason as to why I wanted to play this card in my deck. It's also because it's another rookie that allows us to have the option of getting a 1-cost Digivolution, which is very good at choking our opponent in the early game. Because as a control deck, we really want to slow the game down into our pace as we try to accrue more cards than our opponent, and then eventually we'll just out-card advantage them. So having the option to evolve for 1 if needed be is extremely important in order to try and see more cards to always answer whatever our opponent throws at us. And also, as a slight sneak peek as to what is to come, another reason as to why I wanted to play this deck in my deck as well is because it's also half purple. I really wanted to make sure I had purple available at all times to me, and you'll see why as we get to the text. But that's why I played at 3 copies. Now, to run off our SOC rookies, I was playing 1 copy of the Agumon. It having the alternates of whenever a Kosuke Kisakata gets played, we're able to gain 1 memory and then draw a card. This card was absolutely crazy. It was able to get us so much sudden memory extensions out of absolutely nowhere. Because we're using this and paired up with the Dorumon, every time we're able to D-Mind Link with the Kosuke Kisakata, we can just suddenly gain a memory and draw a card on our turn or our opponent's turn. And of course, another inheritable rebuild never disappointed as well. I actually originally was playing 2 copies of this card for sudden memory extension plays, but unfortunately I need a little bit more X-antibody in my ratios in order to make Yuji Musha really work. And that's why I opted to play the BT17 Dorumon at 3 copies, and this is just 1. You won't really get a chance to get 2 copies of this on the board anyway, unless you're already way far ahead in board presence. So that's why I felt comfortable just at 1 copy. An example of a cheeky thing you could do with this card is, let's say you have a Kosuke Kisakata and a Sephiroth in hand. If for whatever reason you only had 2 memory, say for example you wanted to use a training for some more searches, or if you lost some memory due to Mirage Galgamon or Emperor for example, you can have this Kosuke Kisakata Digivolve into a Sephirothmon, which would normally pass you to -1, and then at the end of your turn, you can D-Mind Link the Kosuke in order to gain a memory and draw a card, in order to continue your turn, and potentially that's a hybrid for game. It's extremely powerful for sudden memory extension plays. And of course, you can just Mind Link it back in whenever you want, because in case you guys didn't notice, Mind Link is not once per turn. I really do love this card, and I would have fit more if space allowed it. And one more thing to kind of notice as well is that Agumon, unlike the most of our rookies in our deck, actually only has 1k DP. Now, you might not think much of it, but it's actually really important that it only has 1k DP, because it means that a lot of rookies, let's say Agumon for example, would actually live in security if they check this, if they didn't hit a Tamer or an option for that matter. And for those of you who don't know anything about the SOC strategy, SOC as a deck thrives on our opponent having board presence. The higher chances of our opponents having free bodies on field for us to interact with is extremely good for us. So even more reasons to why I put this at more than one copy if you so desired. But last but certainly not least, the whole reason why I played Agumon at one copy is because I was really trying to make room for the ST13 Chikurimon. Now, in case you guys couldn't see, its traits are absolute garbage. Why in the world would I be playing this card? Well, you see, like I told you, I already called the fact that Airdramon was going to be the best deck of the format. But you can't just look at the best deck of the format, you also need to look at what people might be playing in the tournament as well. And among the top decks out there that can actually beat Airdramon consistently, Demon Lords was one that was on my mind. And for those of you who have ever played Demon Lords before, for a deck like mine especially that's not really fast at killing our opponent, it could be a pretty rough matchup. Without this card in particular, Demon Lords is extremely hard for us. And I refuse to take a game loss just because I was unlucky in Swiss. Which also, if you guys saw my tweet, I was showing what I faced in the tournament, you would see that was absolutely correct. But that's not the only reason as to why I played this card. I also played this card because I found with all the free advantage we could get as the game progresses of getting our free Tamers as well as free bodies from the Dorugraymon, a well-timed Death X absolutely cooks us. So if you ever saw me in the tournament playing this card, every time I would hard play this down, I would be saying, this is a Death X free zone. No Death X is here. Leave me alone. Which in a Tamer heavy meta, it's pretty likely that Death X can come down. And that's also another reason why I had to tech this card. And also, a slight tangent as another reason why I was playing this card is because I found, while testing around with my friends, I actually found out that this deck kinda sucks against Bouffleur. So I wanted more cards to prevent that too. So honestly, it was just kind of a bonus that this card really helps us in some bad matchups. And also, it just so happened that the new Ancient Greymon and Ancient Gurumon respectively have Digicross as well, while also having an option to reduce their play cost even further, or even play out a Tamer for reduced play cost. And because Chikurimon itself prevents reducing play cost entirely, they will not be able to reduce play cost for their Tamers either. So I felt like it was just a really good meta call to fit two in the deck. And in my opinion, it felt like the best way to fit text for some bad matchups that doesn't really eat up into more deck space. Now of course, there will be matchups where this card is absolutely dead, but worst case scenario, you can always just evo this up anyways. Now for those of you who didn't really want to play this card, or if you wanted to make a deck that's a lot more consistent in particular, I was actually opting to play the BT9 Dorumon over this card instead. It being another card allowing us to selectively discard cards from our hand to set up our trash, while also drawing two cards in order to find more pieces. And since it's an X-antibody, we can always play it off with the Dorugraymon, which is genuinely better than this card. But like I said, I did not want to risk an automatic loss if I ran into some bad matchups in the tournament. Thank you, Chikuri. You put in work. And now we move on to level 2s. Now this should be extremely easy to explain because we are playing black-based SOC after all. We obviously have to play 4 copies of the Dorimon. And yes, these are the same eggs that I stole from my Shinegreymon list. Which, if you've seen those videos as well, you would know that the inheritable effect is, whenever one of our effects places a source underneath it, we're able to draw a card. Which also includes effects like Mind Link, which means that every time we Mind Link with one of our SOC Tamers, we just get a free draw. Which is another thing that Black Base has over Purple Base. We see a lot more cards than them. Which I think is just kind of an important feature as a control strategy in the first place, because the more cards we see, the more tools we'll have for our opponent. And I didn't really see myself going past 4 eggs, so these are the main 4 eggs we are playing. Now going on to the options and text of our deck. We are in fact playing 4 copies of Defense Training. Being able to check the top 2 cards of our deck, getting any black card is extremely important, and of course it being 2 costs is extremely strong for choking as well. As a control deck, we really want it to be prolonging the course of the game, and as we're able to choke our opponent out with cards like this, while also building up our board presence slowly but surely, is extremely powerful. And of course, because it's able to get any black card, it helps us find our SOC Tamers as well. In general, I think that most decks these days should be playing at least 4 to 6 search spells as a general rule of thumb. And 4, unfortunately, is all I could fit, so that's why we only play 4 copies. But those aren't the only options we play. It's time to get to the actual spicy text of our deck. We are also playing 1 X-antibody Proto-Form and 1 Calling from the Darkness. I did tell you before that I wanted to have more purple in my deck as well. Well, this is exactly why. I wanted to make sure that Calling from Darkness was always live. I'll start off with first explaining with X-antibody Proto-Form, it having the effect of we can have one of our Digimon digivolve into an X-antibody Digimon for 1 less memory, and then we slide it underneath as a source. While also having the inheritable effect of whenever the Digimon would leave the battle area for whatever reason, we can add a source to our hand while also putting Proto-Form at the top of our security. which will then go back to our hand anyways. It's kind of a broken card. I really would have fit more copies if I could, but I really did want to fit one copy of Calling from Darkness. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is an option card that is limited to 1. And believe me when I tell you, it was limited to 1 for a reason. It being a purple 1-cost option, having the effect of, I delete one of my own Digimon, and then I can choose any 2 purple Digimon from my trash, and then add it to my hand. Both of them essentially function as a recursion tool of some sorts, but except this one involves deleting our own Digimon. Now keep in mind that deleting one of our own Digimon is not a cost, it's just part of the effect, which means we don't actually have to delete one of our own Digimon in order to get the recursion part. Now if only there were cards that would trigger whenever any of our Digimon would be deleted. Oh wait, that's right, all of our Dexes are able to Digivolve from trash whenever the respective good halves would be deleted. Which means we can actually get a free Digivolve from one memory in order to trigger, let's say, like a Dexdorugoramon board wipe, while also getting 2 cards back into our hand. This card is absolutely broken. And let's not forget, the Dexdorugoramon as well as the Dorugoramon all have the alternate effect of whenever any other Digimon is deleted, we get to unsuspend. And remember, that's not only limited to our opponents, which means at the very worst, this card is essentially demonic disaster. I absolutely love this card. Never bring this back to 4. And also another cute interaction you can do with the X-antibody Proto-Form as well is because the X-antibody Proto-Form's wood effect of when it would leave the battle area, as well as the trash effects of the Dex line whenever the Digimon will be deleted, both trigger at the exact same time. Which means that if both their trigger conditions are met, you can actually use the effect of the Dex line to Digivolve first, and then actually use the Proto-Form to get any sources you may need back into your hand for follow-up play. And of course, setting into your security for an extra life was always useful for control deck. We also get to play these specific techs in general I wanted to have in order to destroy Imperial. And what better than, of course, Shinegreymon Rune Mode, and my ace of choice is actually Megagargomon Ace over the Vikemon Ace. Now you see, going over this card first, I actually noticed that a lot of SOC players are opting to play Vikemon Ace instead, which I honestly think is a genuine mistake. The main reason why they're playing is so they can de-Digivolve the Paledramon in order to make sure they don't have jamming anymore, while also being a sweet tech card for, say, things like Magna X. But what I say to that is, we actually don't really want to get rid of the bodies from Imperial Dramon. Remember, as I told you before, the SOC deck as a whole really thrives on our opponent having board presence for us to work with. And Megagargomo Ace says, you are no longer able to use that Digimon for anything else, because it prevents Digivolutions. And on the off chance that we got high rolled, say, an Imperial Dramon, and they end up on a turn 2 BTCing Paledramon, if we end up going with a force swing play with the Dorugamon into Dorugraymon, if they swing with that Paledramon, they'd be able to suspend the Dorugraymon before it even gets the chance to block, which removes a lot of the interaction we have on our opponent's turn. But playing a card like Megagargomon Ace, which has the when Digivolving effect to be able to unsuspend himself on Digivolution, we could then block with it, while also sending any new rookies they play off of that Davis and Ken. And just when you thought that this card couldn't get any better, its traits are absolutely perfect because it is in fact a machine type, which, as you know, for Marvin Jackson, it would give jamming. So that means that we have another Digimon that is able to just swing twice with jamming. And considering that it's an ace, it's extremely powerful. And at the very worst case scenario that this card is absolutely dead in the matchup, just pitch it off of Marvin Jackson for that one memory. So you heard it here first, folks. Megagargomon Ace is better than Vikemon Ace, at least in my opinion. And to follow that up, as for the other tech against Imperial Dramon, we are also, of course, having to play the Shinegreymon Ruin Mode. Majority of our top end is half purple, so it only makes sense that we would be able to play into this. Now, for those of you who don't know what it does, which I'd be surprised if you didn't, is when Digivolving and on deletion, all of our opponent's Digimon gets minus 5,000 DP until the end of our opponent's turn. And it also has the effect of end of attack. We are able to delete this Digimon, and if you have a Tamer on board, we get to recover one and hatch an egg. Now, for those of you who don't really know how Imperial Dramon as a strategy works, they really rely on using the card Davis and Ken in order to get themselves free bodies to search, while also using their level 4's DNA Digivolve. And in case you haven't actually noticed, none of them are above 5k. Meaning that essentially, as soon as you Digivolve into this, you are essentially skipping their turn. And because of the end of attack being a mandatory deletion, we could potentially skip their turn twice. Which, for any deck in particular, if you're able to skip their turn twice, you've essentially won the game, or you're bad. But this also wasn't just good against Imperial Dramon as well, it's also extremely good against SOC. Because the majority of the time, they're going to be playing purple base. And they really do rely on promoting the Dorugamon in order to gain them free Tamer, as well as to trigger a force swing play with the Dorugamon. But with the Ruin Mode, we've essentially skipped their turn twice. And because we are playing Sephirothmon and they can't, we will never be able to get our turn skipped from a Ruin Mode. Just extra reason that's why black base is superior. And let's not forget to mention that Megagargomon Ace is also good against the SOC matchup as well. Because we're able to prevent them from Digivolving entirely, we also get to turn off their aces as well as their free evos, whether it be from trash or from the Dorugraymon. These techs did absolute wonders in the tournament, and I probably would still be using them to this day in the future. Now, it's time to get to the combo tutorial of the deck. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, there's a lot of things you could do with this deck, so it's really hard to show them all on a case-by-case basis, but in this case, I'm going to show you the coolest one. Now, remember what I told you that SOC as a deck really thrives on our opponent giving us Digimon on the board to interact with. But what do we do if they don't give us any Digimon to interact with? Well, allow me to show you a cool little combo. This is going to be involving the Dexdorugoramon that we don't actually play in our strategy because I wanted to have more consistency. But in case you guys did want to fit it, this is the combo for you. So it's going to be needing a Dexdorugoramon, a Dorugraymon, as well as having a Dorugoramon or a Dorugoramon. It doesn't really matter because I have the same alternates effect of being able to unsuspend, as well as the Eiji Nagasumi. So let's say they give us no Digimon on the board and we mind link with the Dexdorugoramon. If say we hard play any level 3 for 3 memory, because we always have a memory setter, we'll always have 3 memory to work with. We're able to swing with the Dexdorugoramon, alliancing with whatever body we have on play. Actually, this is a bad example. I should be using an SOC rookie instead. It's a lot more better in my opinion, and you'll see why. We're going to be swinging with the Dexdorugoramon and alliancing with the Dorumon here, swinging for 15k in 2 checks. And of course, at the end of attack, with the Dexdorugremon's inheritable, we are able to delete one of our Digimon in order to delete one of our opponent's Digimon with the same level or lower. But as you can see, since another Digimon was deleted, the alternates of the Dexdorugoramon will trigger in order to unsuspend. And of course, the Dorugremon's inheritable now, because whenever this Digimon deletes another Digimon, doesn't have to be your opponent's, we can play a cost 5 or less SOC or X-antibody from our trash, which of course does include that Dorumon we just deleted. And that means we can alliance with it again. This combo by itself is able to do 4 checks to our opponent when our opponent is least expecting it. It's extremely strong. But of course, in order to get that off, you would have to be able to have the Dexdorugoramon inheritable as well, which means if you're playing in purple-based SOC, or in any SOC for that matter, you're not going to be able to get that free Evo off the Dorugraymon. The Dorugraymon free Evo is what makes this deck really work, and it's extremely strong to go into our level 6s for free. And that's exactly why I thought to myself, if only there was a way I could just suddenly get Dexdorugoramon underneath as a source. Oh wait. I wonder what the name of that card was that I was shilling all this time. Yeah, Yuji's insane. Which means that if you did manage to get a free Evo off of the Dorugraymon into, say, a Dexdorugoramon, you're able to swing with the Dexdorugoramon, tap the Yuji in order to slide in Dexdorugoramon underneath. And because its trigger timing is the end of attack, its trigger timing didn't miss, which means that after the battle's over, you can still do that combo anyway. Let this be a lesson. Cool Boy is bad, Yuji is nuts. Go pick your copies up now. And that's the list. I hope this video was super informative and you guys have a little bit of a teaser as to what Black SOC can do. Now for those of you who are interested in seeing what the matchups were like, I'll be sure to leave that in the vlog video coming up next. And I should also give a disclaimer to you as well, unlike purple-based SOC, I will say that black-based SOC is a lot more harder to pilot. Because we don't have as many ways to selectively set up our trash, it is extremely important that whatever you discard is planned at least 2 to 3 turns ahead. But I live for decks like that. Decks that require you to think 2 to 3 steps ahead of your opponent is honestly just the kind of playstyle that I'm looking forward to playing. It's actually exactly how I like to pilot my Machinegymon, and that's why this deck fit me like a glove. Who knows? If this video gets enough likes, maybe I'll even show you some gameplay. But that's going to be it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in Orlando, because I'm going to Nationals. Bye-bye, everybody.